No mai, haere mai. Welcome to the Maxim Institute podcast. I'm Jason, the communications manager here at Maxim. Each week, we pair our latest column with an insightful conversation, taking you behind the scenes of our weekly columns and chatting with the authors to unpack the research, ideas, and discussions that shape their work. Get ready to dig into the latest topic. Today, we talk to researcher Maryanne Spurdle about her recent column. Maryanne, welcome along to the podcast. It's good to have you with us talking about your latest column for Maxim, Euthanising Oversight. Interesting title. Now, this is a column about something that is a scandal, but isn't really a scandal or not as scandalous as it should be. Tell us a little bit about it, Maryanne.
Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of mainstream news coverage. This came out in the Herald a couple of weeks ago. And it's the type of thing that there should be more attention paid to. This is the first glimpse under the hood we've had to the euthanasia legislation that came in 3 years ago. There's a government review by the Ministry of Health that's due next month. So the promise is that we will hear more about how it's going. There is a review committee that was set up in 2021 to review the legislation as it came into effect. And they're supposed to look at the paperwork basically for every single death. 2 of the 3-person committee are no longer part of it. Okay. And they've very recently gone public with the reasons why. Well, one didn't have her contract renewed, and it's potentially because she kept asking questions. And the other one resigned at the end of her first 2-year term because she saw things that she said went against best practice. Okay. As the review committee, they're supposed to make sure that people who are being euthanized, and this is either assisted suicide where someone's given lethal drugs, which has been the small proportion of those who've taken it. Most have taken physician-assisted suicide option, where somebody else actually, gives the
administers
lethal dose.
The lethal dose, yeah.
Yeah. So they're supposed to review the paperwork for every one of those and check that the people being euthanized are eligible, which means they've got a prognosis of 6 months or less. Mm-hmm. They're suffering. They're, sound mind. There's been no coercion. Mm.
And that's kind of important, isn't it, Maryanne? Because those people can't actually speak for themselves once the whole process has gone through. Yeah. Exactly. So these people have a really important role. We're
legalizing situations where one person can kill another person. So you need to make sure that you can validate each one of those as the person actually chose this according to the way the legislation's written. That should be happening. So this oversight committee is supposed to go, yes, this is happening as the legislation has required. The debate over whether or not that should be happening to begin with, that's one that was had before the vote. That is one that's ongoing. But as far as what we're talking about here, it's okay, given that this is the legislation, how should it be being managed? They were not seeing the information that they need to see to actually confirm that all the cases coming before them, those people were eligible and that nothing untoward had happened. And when they asked the Ministry of Health for the details that were missing, the ministry told them, just assume everything's okay. If there's no information, just assume, if there was something that you needed to know, it would be in there basically.
So they're getting these forms kind of things come back with pieces of information that are missing, right? There's just nothing there.
And apparently part of it is down to IT issues, which, okay, that's a bug in a system, but that's kind of an important system to have a bug in. You want to have those things fixed before people continue dying.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, never mind that. Questions they had around, one of them observed that there were more people in rural areas who were opting for euthanasia, and questions around why that would be. Is that because perhaps they don't have adequate access to palliative care, things like this? And her questions were dismissed as, we don't have enough data to look into that. Basically, never mind. We can worry about that later kind of thing. So the oversight committee was not actually allowed to provide the kind of oversight that they felt was necessary. And this is somebody who's a medical ethicist, somebody else who's an expert in palliative care. These are people who
they know.
We would want their input, and we would want things to be done the way they think should be done. So neither of them are on the committee anymore. And then it went into hibernation while it only had one of the 3 members. And so now there are 3 members apparently again, and they've got about a 7-month backlog to get through. This is how the legislation is working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so given all of that, and given, you also mentioned that one of the panelists, the committee members, did their own kind of investigation and found that there were inconsistencies between the information they were given and the information they were getting firsthand from doctors. So given that there's kind of this inconsistency of information and there's this big backlog and it doesn't seem to be working as it should, and now we've got a review going on, how legitimate is this kind of review? Because there seems to be nothing to see here, move along sort of attitude.
Yeah, it seems unlikely that the Ministry of Health is going to go, well, we've got problems, let's properly, address it. Given what the review committee has seen, it seems unlikely that they will properly address it. But, next month we'll find out, hopefully. Hopefully there will be an actual transparent review. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of that and what they actually do. Meanwhile, so David Seymour was a proponent of the original legislation, and the ACT Party, through Todd Stevenson, he's tabled a member's bill that would, if it were to go through, remove the 6-month prognosis requirement, which would open it up to people who have terminal illnesses, but that could kill them at any point in the future. So David Seymour has been very open with the fact that the legislation as it is only as supposedly restrictive as it is because that was the only way to get it across the line, which tells you something right there. Yeah. But as far as the legislation the way it is, he would like to see the restrictions far looser, probably on more fronts than just the 6-month prognosis. They're pushing that ahead before we've even had the review. So whichever way the review goes, there's going to be an attempt to make the restrictions here even looser.
So they're essentially looking at going, if you've got a terminal diagnosis, whether you're going to die in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years or 1 year or 6 months or 6 weeks, you can opt for this and just go, whatever.
And the problematic thing with even the 6-month one is, unless you're talking a matter of days, like less than a couple of weeks, the accuracy of those kind of prognoses is far worse than 50-50. When you're talking about 6 months, about 2/3 of the time, it's an inaccurate prognosis. So even the way it is, I've got a friend back in the UK who was given a 6-month prognosis for lung cancer about 18 years ago.
Wow, yeah.
And clearly that was incorrect. Turns out that there are drugs that his type responds well to. He's still got lung cancer, but he's living, he's working, his life is carrying on. And so even with 6 months, the prospect of somebody feeling despair over a terminal diagnosis and making a decision like this based on information that actually is not necessarily correct, because even medical professionals are not fortune tellers. They can't, nobody can accurately predict the future. And when you're talking about a disease killing someone outside of a couple of weeks, it's really just an educated guess, no matter how qualified someone is.
And I guess length of diagnosis or terminal diagnosis is not the only factor, right? There's also coercion. There's also mental health issues. There's language barriers. In one case, you talked about there was someone who English wasn't their first language, and they
didn't speak English according to the
there you
reviewers.
go.
Yeah, one of the ones that they brought up as this is concerning, they came across one who had been killed, who didn't speak English, who didn't have an interpreter present at the consultation, and there was reason to believe they had dementia. Now, how someone like that has been ticked off as qualifying for euthanasia, we don't know, and this is the problem. We don't know. That should not be happening, because the way the legislation is written, somebody needs to be able to give informed consent, clearly give consent. So, yeah, there are in writing safeguards.
Yes.
But in effect, even the ones that are there, either like the 6-month prognosis they're not guaranteed accurate, or they seem to be just overlooked, as in the case of the person who didn't speak English.
And you talk about referrals to psychiatric care or evaluations, though, like only.
Yeah, that's not a requirement.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be at least two medical practitioners involved. At their discretion, they can refer a patient to somebody who specializes in psychiatric care. Apparently, only about 1% were referred for psychiatric care. You'd expect the number to be a lot higher, because if somebody's considering killing themselves,
that's a big deal.
There's definitely some psychiatric care that you would expect to go along with that the majority of the time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a very big possibility that a lot of people who were applying for euthanasia needed more psychiatric care than was being offered.
Yeah. So what can we do? You say in the column we need to resume our national conversation about euthanasia. How can we go about that? Obviously, you and I talking about this, doing a podcast, writing a column, trying to get the word out there is one way to do it. What are other ways that we can kind of help bring some transparency to this? Let the lawmakers know that we don't want expansion. Like, how can we do that?
I think it'll look different for everybody in their own spheres, and who you can be talking to about this. I think just being aware that the review's happening, that we should be getting that report next month, and following up with whoever our representatives are in whichever area to make sure that that's happening. And it's also good to know, Tanya Unkovich, who's with New Zealand First, she's also tabled a private member's bill that would require palliative care be provided more equitably, and it would be embedded in what the Ministry of Health must fund and provide. So being aware of that and supporting positive moves to helping people at end-of-life stages, I think that's part of it as well, having something hopeful to say.
Yeah. Maryanne, big topic. Very, very serious topic. You've done some good work on this, and I think Maxim's going to have some more things to say about this going forward. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Jason. Quick poll. If 2/3 of the experts monitoring the effects of a new law say they're extremely concerned by its implementation, should we relax its parameters or slam on the brakes? We'd expect to be hearing the squeal of tires right about now, but instead, we're barreling towards the expansion of a risky law while its drivers lock out dissenters. Where's the outcry from those affected? Well, that's the thing. They're dead. 5 years ago, David Seymour assured us that legalizing physician-assisted suicide was not only compassionate, but also safe. Most voters believed him. So now we're one of only 10 countries that allow people to both access legal drugs, assisted suicide, and enlist medical professionals to administer them, voluntary euthanasia. Don't worry, skeptics heard. The oversight will be so rigorous that only people who have no better alternative will get approved. And a review by the Ministry of Health, to be completed this November, will check it's working as advertised. The ACT Party is so confident of a positive review that it has plans to loosen the legislation's restrictions. However, the guardrails that already exist appear ineffective. The doctors who provided systematic oversight of the law say its implementation has been so shoddy they, quote, would not have known if someone had died wrongly, end quote. Here's what the legislation promised. Successful applicants will be competent to make an informed decision, absent coercion from those who might consider them a burden, poor mental health, or cognitive decline. At least 2 medical professionals evaluate each applicant, and the prognosis must be 6 months or less. Each death will be verified by a 3-person committee that reviews clinicians' reports. That committee, formed in 2021, included Dr. Dana Winsley, an ethics expert, and Dr. Jane Greville, a palliative care specialist. Both doctors soon found reports that excluded prognosis, diagnosis, assessment of the patient's capacity, or reasons to trust absence of coercion. If anything untoward occurred, say pressure from caregivers, the death of someone who would benefit from psychiatric care, or ineffective doses that left people dying for hours, how would they know? When the reviewers queried these gaps, the ministry told them to assume nothing was wrong. They aren't convinced. At least one person who was euthanized may have had dementia and didn't speak English, yet no interpreter was present at their assessment. And when Dr. Greville contacted doctors personally to fill gaps in other reports, she found sometimes jarring inconsistencies. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, the ministry didn't renew Dr. Greville's contract. Dr. Winsley resigned following her 2-year term after witnessing things that went against best practice. The committee tasked with ensuring that vulnerable people aren't dying unjustly then went into hibernation. The deaths continued. Compassionate? Safe? Sure, if you're happy assuming nothing has gone wrong. We need to resume our national conversation about euthanasia. If this law can't effect the promised safeguards to support our most vulnerable at the end of their lives, it is not fit for purpose. Euthanize oversight and trust in our institutions dies as well.
Thanks for tuning in to the Maxim Institute podcast. If you want to stay updated on our latest research and insights into New Zealand politics and policy, sign up for our monthly forum email and event invites on our website. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. From the team at Maxim, mā te wā. Goodbye for now.